Hey, Album Book Club viewers, welcome to a new series we're starting called Album Yapcast. This is going to be a series where we just talk about our little offshoots we would do on our podcast, where we don't have to really get back on topic and cut ourselves off. So our first topic is going to be one that was brought up on our Ollie Wride live by Karl himself, which is music has two genres, either good or bad.
I fundamentally believe there's only two genres, and it's good and bad.
That's
and
fair.
that has so much to do with your personal taste that I can't decide that for you. You know, there's a lot of stuff that I get annoyed with because of tropes in the genre, and any genre that I believe has a trope to make it a genre automatically is worse for me. But good and bad are the two fundamental types of music, and whether you like it or not, I think that's the thing you should focus on. Yeah, so fundamentally, really, that's all you should focus on with music is that you either like it or don't. Don't be stressed out about what it is or isn't. I don't know. I feel like a lot of things are classified and shouldn't be. I think that was the genesis of me saying that, was that Ollie Wride doesn't necessarily fit in any genre. He fits in a lot of genres, and I think it's a disservice to call a lot of music one thing and stick it in a corner, put it in a box. I think if you did, most music would just be labeled pop rock. There are definitely genres that do exist because of the music being in a box. A lot of metal is that way. We've talked about that before.
I feel like you're trying to put it into a box also, but it's just one of two boxes instead of one of a bunch of different boxes.
Definitely, that's the case. I either like it or I don't. I mean, there's a lot of bad music out there.
I feel like the boxes, while they're still there, they're much bigger though. It allows for like more room to divulge, so I can kind of see where you're coming from. But I think that we would miss out on a lot of the small niche things that we would get, like some of the evolutions on certain sounds. Like you brought up metal. You know, metal evolved in a lot of different ways in a lot of different subsects, and while keeping like the same kind of base to it. And that home base is kind of what people kind of generalize music into.
I think metal might be the only one that actually sticks to the rules, though, of what, like... Because a lot of artists will call something a genre because that's what their inspiration was, but that doesn't mean that the music they make is that genre. I don't know. It makes me think of record stores and how mad I am trying to find records that I want, because I never know if they're going to be in jazz. I never know if they're going to be in, like, novelty music. I never know if they're going to be in country. I never know if they're going to be in rock. Like, I would rather it just be all sorted together alphabetically. And that would make my life so much better because I could just dig through everything rather than having to go section by section. I don't know.
I feel like that could also, wouldn't that hurt like the general consumer? Like, let's say somebody who doesn't have a very big catalog of music, they're going into a record store just kind of trying to find a vibe, trying to find something new. I feel like the genres that we have allow for like a good split. Like, you already kind of know you like this kind of sound, so let's go over to this section and pull something from there.
You know, I see. I guess I just have a different mentality, because if I bought a record I didn't like, I would just sell it back into the record store and be like, oh well. You know, it's never been like a life or death situation for me.
In the middle of that, I got like the mental image of a record store split down the middle. One side is music Karl loves, and the other side is music Karl hates.
That would be super divided. Yeah, if I ran a record store, it would be incredibly cursed for that reason.
Yeah, I think that is really just the overarching issue, which is good or bad music. While I do agree to that being the true sentiment, that is correct. There is either good or bad music. That changes to everybody. There is good or bad music to me. There is good or bad music to you guys. I like Norwegian black metal. That is shit to you two, for sure.
It ain't that bad.
And it's like, you can tolerate it. It's just how it is, you know. There's such a grandiose scale of it that, yeah, it is either good or bad. But I do also agree with what Karl's saying, is it is kind of, you know, bad to also lump someone into a corner. Like, we talk about how alternative is such a big genre. It's terrible. I hate alternative being a genre because it's 70,000 different things that don't sound like each other. So I can't even say I like the genre of alternative. I can be like, I like this alternative album or this alternative artist, but that's it. So I understand that it's like we can get too broad and it kills people, and we can also get too narrow and it kills people. So good or bad, yes, but that changes to everybody.
I'd almost say for me, there's even a third genre of music I understand why people like it, or there might even be a fourth one of I appreciate it for what it is. Like I appreciate the object of the music. Like, what am I thinking of? I appreciate the actual sound quality and what it meant
You
historically.
Maybe you mean you appreciate like the artistry behind it?
I mean, like, yeah, I appreciate it for what it is, but not how it sounds.
Oh,
And I
Its
know
mark in
that
history. And,
yeah, or what it did, or where it came out, or all that stuff. There's a lot of music that's that way, and
I mean, we talk about the Beatles all the time. Love them or hate them, you have to appreciate what they did. Because without the Beatles, there isn't modern music. It's just how it is.
right, that was about to be my example. Is I learned to like some Beatles and tolerate the rest of it because of that. Some of it's not. Some of it's pretty terrible, but it just kind of depends on what it is. And you can roll any of their albums and be fine. There's just it's up and down.
It's a roller coaster for sure.
Yep. I guess on the like original point of good or bad, we are doing this show where we rank everything from 1 to 10. That alone is more than good or bad, because we're picking out the where it sits in the middle of that, and that's.
I guess
like,
we
when
do have 10 boxes instead of 2, right?
Yeah. But like when we go into it and explain like how we have been, yeah, you're right.
I know what I was trying to say. I can objectively enjoy music instead of subjectively enjoying music sometimes. I can like separate that part of my brain, and that's weird, but if you delve into music history and the background stuff that we talk about sometimes, that's important. A song can be mixed really well and be bad music. That's a great example.
So, I mean, even to your point, Connor, it's with the numbers thing. I disagree even with that statement. I will flat out be like, this is bad music, but it's a 6 out of 10. And know going in that it's bad music to me. So yes, music is good or bad off the bat. I can still give it a number scale, but it's bad music to me. I can say this is a 6 out of 10 on the bad side, but it's still bad. I think we're looking at this very black or white, like bad means I won't like it, and good means I love it. But that's not what it is. I can be like, this is bad, but I can appreciate these parts of it and say the rest is shit, get it out of my face. But this is good, and I want it all in my face, except these parts. So black or white, you're correct. But when you look at it like in full picture, I can say this is bad. Here's what's good about it. Here's what's good. Here's what's bad about it. And that's what our show is designed to do, is give the people who are assholes a platform.
I think I'm pretty objective most of the time with my scores, actually. Now, I have some subjective things that like make me angry enough, but I always bring it up when I talk about it. And we all do a very good job talking about like, well, subjectively, I don't like this, but we're still pretty objective with our score ranges.
How many times have I like said, oh, I don't like this song, but I know realistically it's a 7, so that's what I'm giving it. It's just how it works. Sometimes I hate this, but it's because I hate it, not because it's bad.
Yeah, I think it's funny because like when I listen to a song, I listen to it and I'm like, okay, well that could have been a 6 to an 8. What made me mad? So I think there's like a 2-point swing subjectively on top, and then there's like you get X amount of the objective score.
I don't know. You hate Metallica, Karl.
I
There's some artists that you do just hate. You genuinely do just like, you're like, I can't stand them. They're garbage.
And
no one should like them. And I understand that. There's so many artists I have like that where I'm like, nobody should like these people.
Next time on the Appcast, we'll list all of them.
Well, so like, okay, so Metallica, for example, is because they are all such bad human beings that I literally will not do anything to help them. Like, I don't want to make Lars Ulrich any money. If I can find any way to take money from that man, I will do it. I mean, I just absolutely cannot stand that guy to a level that is hard to articulate. That's why I don't listen to Metallica.
No,
And
I completely get it.
I do my best to not let that happen. That's why I tend to not read into bands or do this or do that. And that's part of why the show's been so awesome, is because most of the stuff we pick is kind of right under that top layer. And I don't know. I don't have like a prejudice against them. You know, unfortunately, I have a huge prejudice against Lars Ulrich in that case. You know, But it has to do with just people being jerks to other people in the music industry. All of the artists that I don't like is because of some thing like that. And that changes all the time. I mean, I'm getting to a point where, like, it's hard for me to listen to Phil Collins because he's become so insane the last few years. Like his insanity is ruining In the Air Tonight for me. And if...
Not the Brother Bear soundtrack.
I know.
No.
Dude, if I wasn't around music all the time and in the music industry and doing all this stuff, I could just rock out Miami Vice soundtrack or whatever that was originally on, be fine.
I mean, we've all kind of talked about labels, but I feel like we haven't really divulged into how we feel about labels in the music industry. Because I do think that they can be harmful when they're used kind of in the improper way. Like you brought up alternative. It's really broad. A lot of people label things alternative that probably shouldn't be labeled alternative. But that's also part of why alternative is so broad, because it's kind of a broad thing in general, So without having that freedom of kind of whatever genre, a genre that has 70 different thousand things in it, do you think we'd be getting some really cool stuff that sticks out in there?
Here's my problem. You can, alternative is too broad.
Yeah.
You can take chunks of alternative and go, this is rock. And then, you don't have to subclassify it past that. You can just go, this is in the wave of rock, or this is in the wave of pop. But it's because it's pop with X in it.
Right.
It's not.
I would rather someone tell me that something is third wave ska than ska. I would rather know the definitive details. But the biggest thing we missed and the biggest thing we haven't talked about is that bands don't usually pick the genres the record companies do.
Yeah.
That's true.
They pick the genre that thinks they're going to sell under. Bands typically create a product and then whoever is going to sell that product labels it as something. That's how so many albums come out as pop rock.
Can we talk about the sub-classifications though and all that stupid shit? Why is there something called crust punk and we get too many that it's just then metal is the worst about it. I think with especially how gatekeepy they are and to the point of causing fights and violence over it of you're not metalcore, you're thrash or yada yada
But
yada.
it's very clearly defined though, and if a band tries to break those boundaries and cross over, they should know that they're no longer in that genre because they have hard-edged rules. But metal is very much if you're this and not that. Stop being that. Like metal is a genre that you cannot. You are either metal or you are the specific thing that you are.
That's true. I guess it's mostly knocked loose because they've faced backlash because they kind of changed their sound up and went from one to the other. I don't remember which, so I'm not even going to try and say. And they were still labeling themselves as X band because most of their discography is except this one thing. And I don't think it's disingenuous to say, yes, this is what my band is. Here's an album that's out of genre.
I also think it kind of only is that bad in punk and metal.
Yeah.
I don't think any other genre has it nearly as bad, and it's kind of manageable everywhere else.
With the Beatles, go back to the Beatles. Dude, the beginning of the Beatles, you listen to and you're like, oh, this is the same pop that everyone else was doing at the time. And you get to the end of the Beatles and it's psychedelic rock or experimental rock. I mean, you some of it might even get to it's almost music concrete, kind of like they're just using sound samples. I mean, there's so many different layers of stuff. Bands evolve, things change, and that's another thing I was going to bring up. Really, albums should be labeled and not bands.
I
100%
agree.
agree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think even on streaming platforms they are like that. There's certain bands that have different genres on different albums.
Streaming genres are just stupid.
Also, Apple Music is the
Apple
worst
Music
at
is the
this,
worst.
so-
Well, and I talk about it all the time with people. There are bands that you will only like one of their albums. That's a super common thing. And there's a lot of bands that change so much over their tenure that Fleetwood Mac's another great example. If you like Dreams, you were not going to. Well, if you like Dreams, it doesn't mean you're going to like Fleetwood Mac, the blues band from 10 years earlier that only has 2 of the same members, I think. Someone's going to fact check me there, and I'm going to get reamed. But it doesn't mean that you're going to like the earlier stuff. Things change, and there's a good man. I'm trying to remember the exact quote. There's a quote because Rush, one of my favorite bands, all of their albums are different, and they were asked about it in an interview, and they said something along the effects of, "Well, if there are fans, they'll buy the new album." we're going to make the music we want to make. If there are fans, they'll buy it. We're not afraid of losing fans because we make the music we want to. And any band that does that immediately, is going to get my respect.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
It's hard to think of historical things that aren't going to be like, like I'm reaching some of them.
Mm.
I don't know. We talked about the metal thing where metal genres are very in a square. I feel like a lot of electronic genres can be too, just because they're so clearly defined. Like jungle is clearly jungle, drum and bass is clearly
Yeah.
drum and bass, and if you cross those borders, people get really mad at you.
See, I haven't had too much problem with electronic, but metal's the worst, 100% about this. But yeah, no, I mean, like pop's got like 3, electronic's got a handful, but they're all pretty easy to identify.
I guess the other thing I could talk about is how like there's no such thing as indie, and if you think that indie is a thing, you're wrong.
Indie just means independent.
Indie has become its own sound, kind of. You're right that the word itself does not mean a genre, but I think it's in the last I don't know how many years, but it's kind of taken on a sound of its own.
That whole indie rock thing that happened in the early 2000s, I love a lot of the music. It just makes me furious because all the labels those guys were on were then owned by the same label.
Mm.
So like the whole thing is that people didn't want to listen to music from the big record labels. They didn't want to listen to a Columbia produced artist. So then Columbia just hired someone who in some cases hired someone else to start a record label. So you would have this like niche record label owned by a bigger record label owned by Columbia. And the money was still coming from the same credit corporation in the long run. And there are actually even more industry plants in independent music than most genres. I don't know. That's one of them that just kind of rubs me the wrong way.
I'll say this. I use 2 different tags when I post videos. If it's indie, the like indie genre that people think of, and independent artist is its own tab that I use. So
Yeah. The other one that's cool, I keep seeing more people calling their music Americana. People have been burned by the folk tag. It's going out of style, and people are labeling things as Americana. That's started happening again.
I mean, for someone like me, if I look at an album and it's in the folk genre, I typically don't even pick it up. I don't even try and look at it.
Yeah. What if it said country? You would think about it,
Kind of.
but see if it says Americana, it doesn't bother you. So a lot of it's just marketing.
Honestly, if something did say Americana on it, I would be more likely to pick it up than if it said country or folk.
I'm going to keep it a $150 with you. I don't give a shit. I ain't looking over there unless someone tells me about the album and then tells me it's good. Like, I listen to country music. I like country music. It's all shit people have shown me because so much of it I've heard, I think it's just ass. So I don't even want to try.
I dig through the used bin, but that's just because a lot of good, especially in early country, a lot of those musicians are incredible musicians, and you can get stuff that's as good as the jazz from the era on an album that will be considered country, even though it doesn't have any vocals, just because those guys were in Nashville. And that's the other thing, we haven't brought this up. Geographic location has a lot to do with it. In that, so like, if an album comes out of Nashville, at least, I guess.
I was about to say,
the late
coming
90s.
Coming with time, I feel like that's changed a lot.
It has recently, but
Like-
but before
Before the 80s.
well, no, before like 2000, if it came out of Nashville, it was probably labeled country.
Before a quarter of a century ago.
I mean, but
No,
I don't know.
you have a point. You definitely have a point.
Yeah.
Back when this was like when genres were still kind of, I wouldn't say new, but back when it was harder to listen to everything and really be from some like Norwegian black metal, right? Back in the 80s and the 90s, what percentage of an American would be able to even hear something like that?
Like less than 1 probably.
But today, we can just look it up on our phones and listen to it immediately. So there's a lot more like expanding the horizons that's happened with the age of, technology and phones and streaming and all that.
And unfortunately, a lot of it does have to do with your like not only your location but your socioeconomic background. There's a lot of artists that get labeled as hip hop because they're not necessarily rich enough to make pop music. That happens a lot still to this day. And then talk about the elephant in the room. If we go far enough back, they were called race records. That's what became R&B. We have always labeled stuff that, and things are way better now, But if we're talking about in history where all these labels came from, some of them did not come out of such a great place. And a lot of those genres and a lot of those things have been destroyed so that, it's kind of been, I won't say whitewashed, but removed from history a little bit. But it definitely happened. So a lot of those labels do not have pleasant connotations. So that's part of the other issue I have with it.
That sums up this week's Yapcast.
All right. I think that sums up this week's Yapcast. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to click like and subscribe, and keep coming back for more.
Be sure to let us know how you feel about this type of content in the comments below.